"You can't come inside, Dorcas. Look at you." Thomas said it quietly, smiling for the cameras flashing 10 feet away. He adjusted his silk tie, his blue eyes scanning the crowd over my shoulder, looking for someone more important. We were standing at the velvet rope of the Meridian Gala, the biggest architectural award ceremony of the year. I was wearing the emerald gown he had picked out for me, but his hand was pressing firmly against my lower back, pushing me away from the entrance, not toward it. "I don't understand," I whispered, keeping my face neutral. "I have a ticket. We're celebrating your nomination." "The ticket is for a +1 who fits the brand, Dorcas," he murmured, his voice smooth, the same tone he used when explaining complex blueprints to difficult clients. "You look stiff. You look like you're trying too hard. It's embarrassing. Just go back to the hotel. I'll text you when I'm done." He didn't wait for my answer. He turned his back on me, flashed his dazzling, practiced smile at the security guard, and unhooked the rope himself. A tall blonde woman in a shimmering silver dress, his lead interior designer Melissa, slipped up beside him. She didn't look at me. She just took his arm as if it belonged to her, and they walked onto the red carpet together. I stood alone on the sidewalk, the cold London wind biting through my dress, while photographers shouted Thomas's name. Before we continue, subscribe, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay till the end, the truth changes everything. It hadn't always been like this. 3 years ago, when I met Thomas, he was a struggling junior architect with big ideas and a mountain of student debt. I was the quiet logistics manager at a shipping firm. He liked that I was grounded. He told me my calm was his anchor. He loved that I listened more than I spoke, that I didn't care about the flashy side of his industry. "You're real," he used to say, tracing the line of my jaw with his thumb. "Everyone else is just noise. You're the silence I need." But as Thomas climbed the ladder, the silence he claimed to love started to annoy him. When he made partner, he stopped asking about my day. When he won his first regional award, he stopped inviting me to dinners. He started buying me clothes, muted colors, simple cuts, telling me he was refining my style. I didn't argue. I assumed he knew this world better than I did. I thought he was trying to help me fit into his new life. I didn't realize he was slowly editing me out of it. The rejection at the gala wasn't sudden. It was the finale of a long, slow performance. The drive over had been silent. Thomas had spent the entire 40 minutes on his phone, typing furiously. When I tried to hold his hand, he pulled away, pretending to reach for his tablet. "Did you sign those papers I left on the counter?" he had asked without looking up. "The tax forms?" I asked. "Yes. Just standard liability stuff for the firm. Since we're married, your assets, meager as they are, need to be separated from the company's liability. It protects us." I had signed them. I always signed them. I trusted Thomas with everything. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. He was the man who had promised to build a life with me. Now, standing outside the Meridian Hall, watching through the glass doors as he laughed with Melissa, placing a possessive hand on her waist, the pieces started to click together. The tax forms that had been 50 pages long. The separate bank accounts he insisted on last month for better interest rates. The way he had been sleeping in the guest room for weeks, claiming he had late-night calls with international clients. He wasn't protecting us. He was uncoupling himself. I shivered, but I didn't move toward the taxi stand. My mother had taught me many things, but running away was not one of them. "Dignity, Dorcas," she used to tell me in her low, steady voice. "Panic is for people who don't know their own strength. You stand still and you watch. The truth always reveals itself if you are quiet enough to hear it." I walked up to the side entrance. The security guard, a large man with a tired face, held up a hand. "Private event, ma'am. VIPs and staff only." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "My husband just went inside. Thomas Brown. I have his medication in my purse. He forgot it." It was a lie, but a calm one. The guard hesitated. I didn't look like a crasher. I looked like a worried wife in an expensive dress. "Check the guest list if you want," I added. He glanced at his clipboard. Brown. Yeah, he's on the nominee table. Go ahead, but make it quick. The coat check is to the left if you need to drop anything. I walked in. I didn't go to the coat check. I found a quiet corner near a large potted fern in the lobby, just outside the main ballroom doors. The doors were open, and the sound of applause and clinking glasses drifted out. From my vantage point, I could see table 3, the prime table near the stage. Thomas was sitting there. Melissa was next to him. They looked like the perfect power couple. He was whispering something in her ear, and she threw her head back, laughing. It was a genuine laugh, intimate and comfortable. A server walked by with a tray of champagne. I turned away so I wouldn't be recognized, staring at a large bronze plaque on the wall listing the event's founding donors. Excuse me. A sharp voice came from behind me. I turned. It was Melissa. She had come out to the lobby, perhaps to use the restroom or make a call. She stopped when she saw me, her expression shifting from surprise to cold amusement. Dorcas. She said my name like it was a question she already knew the answer to. What are you doing here? Thomas said you went back to the hotel. He said you weren't feeling well. I felt better, I said simply. Melissa stepped closer. She was beautiful, undeniable, but her eyes were hard. Look, let's be adults here. Thomas is having the biggest night of his career. He doesn't need distractions. He's trying to secure the Henderson contract tonight. You know how important image is to him. And I damage his image? I asked. She sighed, a sound of exaggerated pity. It's not about damage, sweetie. It's about fit. Thomas is going global. He needs a partner who understands that world, who was born for it. You're lovely in your own way, but you're in a small town. You're logistics. You're safe. She checked her reflection in the glass of a framed poster. Thomas has outgrown safety. Is that what he told you? He didn't have to, she smirked. The divorce papers he filed this morning speak for themselves. Oh. Did he not tell you yet? The air left my lungs. Divorce papers. Filed this morning. The tax forms. I see, I managed to say. My hands were trembling, so I clasped them together in front of me. Thank you for telling me, Melissa. Ideally, he wanted to do this quietly after the awards, she continued, checking her nails. He's generous, you know. He's willing to give you the apartment lease for a few months until you get back on your feet. But the house, the accounts, well, you signed those rights away last week. The lawyer said it was ironclad. She leaned in, her perfume thick and cloying. Do yourself a favor. Leave before he sees you. Don't make a scene. It's pathetic. She turned on her heel and walked back into the ballroom. I stood frozen. The lobby felt vast and cold. I could see Thomas inside, standing up now to shake hands with a group of older men in gray suits. He looked confident, unburdened. He had stripped me of my assets, my home and my marriage, all while I cooked his dinner and ironed his shirts. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and humiliating. I wiped it away instantly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march in there and overturn the table. I wanted to tell everyone what a fraud he was. But I didn't. I remembered who I was. I took a breath, counting to 4. I smoothed the front of my dress. I was about to turn and leave, to retreat and regroup, when the main revolving doors of the lobby spun open. The atmosphere in the lobby shifted instantly. The security guards straightened their spines. The concierge stopped typing. A group of 4 men walked in. They moved differently than the other guests, slower, with the heavy gravity of true power. In the center of the group was an older man, tall, with dark skin and a shock of white hair. He leaned on a cane with a silver handle, but he didn't need it for support. It was purely stylistic. He wore a bespoke tuxedo that cost more than Thomas's entire year of tuition. It was Lord Magnus Titus, the owner of the Thorn Group. Every architect in that room, including Thomas, was desperate to impress. He was the Henderson contract Melissa had mentioned. Henderson was just a subsidiary of Titus's empire. The event coordinator, a frantic woman with a headset, rushed over to him. Lord Thorn. We weren't expecting you until the speeches. Please right this way, we have the VIP box ready. Lord Titus didn't look at her. He stopped in the middle of the lobby. His sharp dark eyes scanned the room, ignoring the marble statues and the chandeliers. He was looking for people. His gaze swept over the security guards, over the rushing waiters, and then landed on me. I was standing in the shadow of the fern, trying to be invisible. But when his eyes met mine, he stopped. The polite, distant expression on his face vanished, replaced by something intense and focused. He said something to his assistants, and they immediately fell back. The coordinator looked confused, following his gaze to the corner where I stood. Lord Titus changed his path. He walked straight toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't seen him in 10 years. Not since the funeral. Not since I walked away from everything. He stopped 3 feet in front of me. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Even the concierge was staring. "Dorcas," he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and familiar. "Hello, Uncle Magnus," I whispered. "Uncle Magnus," I corrected myself, the name feeling heavy and strange on my tongue after a decade of silence. He didn't hug me. The Titus family didn't do public displays of affection. Instead, he leaned in, his dark eyes searching my face, looking for the 18-year-old girl who had run away from his estate 10 years ago. "You're hard to find, Dorcas," he said, his voice low and vibrating with that familiar, gravelly authority. "You changed your name. You took a job moving boxes." "I took a job in logistics," I said softly, standing my ground. I wasn't a child anymore. I wanted a life that belonged to me. A life without the weight of the legacy. "And how is that going?" He glanced at my empty ring finger, then at the ballroom doors where Thomas was currently toasting his own success. "It seems that simple life has its own complications." I followed his gaze. "It's over, Uncle. He filed for divorce this morning. I'm just leaving." Leaving. Lord Magnus Titus straightened up, gripping his cane. The steel in his spine seemed to sharpen. "You are a Titus. We do not leave rooms. We own them." Before I could respond, the ballroom doors swung open again. Thomas stepped out, looking flushed and victorious, a champagne glass in his hand. Melissa was right beside him, her hand tucked possessively into the crook of his elbow. They were laughing at something, likely a joke at my expense, until Thomas looked up and froze. He saw the security detail first. Then he saw the cane. Then he saw the man. Thomas's eyes went wide. The arrogance drained out of his face, replaced instantly by the hungry, desperate look of a man seeing his idol. He didn't even notice me standing in the shadow of the fern. All he saw was Lord Magnus Titus, the billionaire developer who held the keys to the city's skyline. "Lord Titus," Thomas breathed, practically dropping Melissa's arm as he rushed forward. He smoothed his jacket, his movements jerky and eager. "My God, what an honor. I had no idea you were attending." Thomas stopped 3 feet away, bowing his head slightly. "I'm Thomas Brown. We exchanged emails regarding the Henderson project proposal. I'm the nominee for tonight." Magnus didn't extend his hand. He just stood there, tall and impassive, looking at Thomas with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a bug. "I know who you are, Mr. Brown," Magnus said calmly. "I've been reading a lot about you today." Thomas beamed, puffing out his chest. "I hope the press has been kind. We've been working hard to modernize the firm's image." "I wasn't reading the press," Magnus said. "I was reading a legal filing. A divorce petition, to be exact." The smile faltered on Thomas's face. He blinked confused. Melissa stepped up beside him, her silver dress catching the lobby lights. She looked between Magnus and Thomas, sensing the tension but not understanding the source. "Oh," Thomas gave a nervous chuckle, waving his hand dismissively. Yes. It's a personal matter. Unfortunate, really. My ex-wife. She just wasn't cut out for this level of success. You know how it is. Sometimes you have to trim the dead weight to fly higher." I felt a sharp pain in my chest at the words dead weight. But I forced myself to breathe. Dead weight. That was what I was to him. The woman who had paid his rent while he interned. The woman who proofread his thesis. Dead weight. Magnus didn't smile. He turned his head slowly, looking directly at me where I stood by the plant. Thomas followed his gaze. When he saw me, his face twisted into a mask of irritation. "Dorcas," he snapped, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I told you to go to the hotel. Jesus, are you bothering Lord Titus?" "I'm so sorry, sir." He turned back to Magnus, his apologetic smile returning. "She's a bit confused. She doesn't understand protocol. I'll have security escort her out immediately." Thomas reached out to grab my arm, his fingers digging into the fabric of my dress. "Come on, Dorcas. Don't make this pathetic." "Remove your hand," Magnus said. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. He simply spoke the words and they landed like stones. Thomas froze. He looked at Magnus, then at his own hand gripping my arm. He slowly pulled his fingers back, confused. "Sir? I'm just trying to spare you the nuisance." "She's nobody." "Nobody," Magnus repeated, testing the word. He stepped closer to me, moving into the light. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a heavy, claiming weight. "That is an interesting way to describe the woman you just spent 3 years living with." Melissa spoke up for the first time, her voice sticky sweetness. "Lord Titus, surely we don't need to discuss domestic staff matters? Thomas has big ideas for your waterfront development. We were hoping." "Be quiet," Magnus said, not even looking at her. Melissa's mouth snapped shut with an audible click. Magnus looked at Thomas. "You mentioned the Henderson contract, Mr. Brown. You want the job." "More than anything," Thomas said, his hunger overriding his confusion. "I have the blueprints. I have a vision." "The Henderson project is a subsidiary of the Titus Group," Magnus said, his voice dry. "I don't make the final decision on the architectural lead. That power lies with the head of the family trust." "Of course," Thomas nodded eagerly. "I'd be honored to present to them. When can I meet them?" "You already have," Magnus said. He turned slightly, gesturing to me with his free hand. "Allow me to reintroduce you," Magnus said, his eyes locking onto Thomas's pale face. "This is my niece, the daughter of my late brother, David Titus. Her name is Dorcas Titus, and she is the sole voting shareholder of the trust that owns the land you want to build on." The silence that followed was absolute. It was louder than the applause from the ballroom. Thomas stared at me. He looked at my face, my hair, the simple earrings he had bought me for my birthday. He looked for a joke, a punchline, but found none. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Dorcas," he whispered finally. "Titus." "Yes," I said. My voice is steady now. The trembling had stopped. "You never asked about my family, Thomas. In 3 years you never once asked about my maiden name. You just assumed I didn't have one worth knowing." "But..." Thomas stumbled back a step, his mind visibly racing, trying to recalculate the math of his life. "But the papers. The assets." "Ah, yes," Magnus said, pulling a folded document from his tuxedo pocket. "My lawyers reviewed the filing you submitted this morning. You were very thorough, Mr. Brown. You insisted on a complete and total separation of all past, present, and future assets and liabilities. You wanted a clean break." Magnus smiled, and it was a terrifying thing. "You specifically waived your right to any spousal support or claim on her personal inheritance or familial holdings, believing she had none. You legally walled yourself off from the Titus fortune 3 hours ago." Melissa let out a small, strangled gasp. She looked at Thomas with pure horror. Not because he was in trouble, but because she realized she had just stolen a man who had accidentally bankrupted himself. Thomas looked sick. "Dorcas, wait. I didn't know. You lied to me. You hid this." "I didn't hide anything," I said calmly. "I just didn't use it. I want it to be loved for me, Thomas, not for the buildings my grandfather built." And I got my answer, didn't I? No, no, look. Thomas stepped toward me, his hands raising in a pleading gesture, the arrogance completely gone. Baby, please. I was stressed. The gala, the pressure. I didn't mean those things I said outside. You know me. We're a team. We can fix this. He reached for my hand again. I looked at his hand, the same hand that had pushed me away 10 minutes ago. The same hand that had signed the papers to throw me out of my own home. There is nothing to fix, I said. You wanted a partner who fits your brand, Thomas. You have her. I looked at Melissa. She flinched. Come, Dorcas, Magnus said, offering me his arm. The board is waiting in the private box. We have a decision to make regarding the contract. I took my uncle's arm. We turned away from them. Dorcas, Thomas called out, his voice cracking, desperate enough that heads in the lobby turned. Dorcas, you can't just walk away. We're married. I didn't look back. I walked toward the ballroom doors, the heavy wood parting for us. As we crossed the threshold, the noise of the gala washed over us, but for the first time in 3 years I didn't feel small. We walked up the grand staircase toward the VIP balcony. I could feel Thomas's eyes burning into my back, but I didn't stop. When we reached the private box, Magnus closed the heavy velvet curtains, shutting out the noise. He pointed to a chair at the head of a small conference table where 3 lawyers were already sitting, waiting for us. Sit, Magnus said gently. I sat. He's going to come up here, Magnus warned, pouring a glass of water. Men like him don't accept defeat quietly. He thinks he can charm his way back in. He thinks you're weak. I know, I said. I picked up the glass, watching the water settle. He thinks I'm the same woman who signed whatever he put in front of her. Magnus placed a thick leather folder on the table. Are you? I opened the folder. It was the Henderson contract. The one Thomas would kill for. The one that would make his career or end it. No, I said quietly, picking up a pen. I'm not. Just then the handle of the VIP box door rattled. Someone was trying to get in. It was locked, but the knocking started, insistent, frantic pounding. Dorcas, open the door. It was Thomas. He sounded breathless, panicked. We need to talk. Right now. I looked at the door, then at Magnus. Do you want me to call security? Magnus asked. No, I said, uncapping the pen. Let him knock. I want him to hear this. Let him in, I said to the security guard standing by the inner door. Magnus raised an eyebrow, but he nodded. The guard unlocked the heavy oak door and swung it open. Thomas stumbled in. He looked frantic, his hair disheveled. A stark contrast to the polished image he presented on the red carpet 20 minutes ago. Melissa was hovering in the hallway behind him, looking unsure whether to enter or run. Dorcas, Thomas breathed, rushing toward the table. Thank God. Look, this is insane. We need to stop this charade before it goes too far. He didn't look at Magnus. He looked only at me, his eyes pleading. I know I messed up, he said, his voice dropping to that intimate whisper he used to use when he wanted forgiveness for missing a date or forgetting an anniversary. I got caught up in the game. You know how much pressure I'm under. But baby, we're a team. You and me. Always. He reached for my hand again. I pulled it back, resting it on the leather folder. We aren't a team, Thomas, I said quietly. You made sure of that. You filed the papers. You separated the assets. You wanted to be a self-made man. It was just paperwork, he insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. It doesn't mean anything compared to what we have. Look, let's just sign this contract, secure the funding, and we can go home. We can talk about everything in the morning. I'll fire the lawyers. I swear. I looked down at the blueprints spread out on the table. They were his designs for the waterfront, glass towers, sharp angles, aggressive heights. They were impressive in a cold, imposing way. I've been looking at your proposal, I said, ignoring his pleas. Thomas blinked, confused by the shift in topic. What? The waterfront project, I continued, tracing a line on the blueprint. You prioritize verticality over community integration. You have 3 luxury towers but no green space. You removed the public library access to maximize retail footage. Dorcas, what are you talking about? Thomas scoffed, a flash of his old arrogance breaking through the panic. You don't understand architecture. You manage shipping crates. Just sign the approval so we can leave. I understand, Flo, I said, looking up at him. I understand that a building without a foundation crumbles. And I understand that a space designed without empathy is just a cage. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. This proposal doesn't fit the Titus Trust vision, I said clearly. It's vanity, Thomas, not community. I flipped to the final page of the contract. There was a line for the lead architect, and a line for trust approval. Dorcas, don't, Thomas warned, his voice hardening. Don't you dare ruin this for me. I built this career from nothing. You're just a spectator. No, I said. I'm the owner. I wrote a single word across the signature line in large, flowing letters, rejected. Then I closed the folder. The sound of the heavy cover hitting the table echoed in the small room. Thomas stared at the folder. His face went gray. The millions of dollars, the global fame, the magazine covers, they all evaporated in that second. You. He choked out. You're vindictive. Mr. Sterling, Magnus interrupted, his voice like a gavel. You have your answer. The Titus Group will be seeking other proposals. I suggest you leave before I have you removed for trespassing. Thomas looked around the room, desperate for an ally. He turned to the door. Melissa? Tell them how good the designs are. We all looked at the doorway. Melissa was standing there watching the scene unfold. She looked at Thomas, sweaty, desperate, and now professionally toxic. She looked at Magnus, the most powerful man in the city. Then she looked at me. She saw the reality. Thomas was no longer a rising star. He was a sinking stone. I think I'll take a cab, Melissa said coldly. She didn't wait for him. She turned and walked away down the corridor, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Thomas watched her go, his mouth slightly open. The double betrayal hit him hard. He slumped, the fight draining out of him. I loved you, he whispered to me, a last-ditch effort. I really did. No, Thomas, I said, standing up. You loved that I made you feel big. But you never realized that you can't build a tall building on a small foundation. I signaled the guard. Please escort Mr. Sterling to the exit. Thomas didn't fight. He let the guard guide him out. He looked back at me one last time, his eyes filled with a confusion that would likely haunt him for years. He still didn't understand how the quiet girl in the background had become the one holding the pen. The door closed. The silence in the room was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Magnus poured 2 glasses of sparkling water. He slid one across the table to me. You handled that well, he said. Better than I would have. I would have yelled. I took a sip, the cool water soothing my dry throat. Yelling is for people who need to be heard, Uncle. I don't need to shout anymore. 6 months later, the morning sun hit the balcony of my new apartment. It wasn't a penthouse. It was a beautiful, light-filled loft in a neighborhood Thomas would have called up and coming. But I called alive. I sat at my kitchen island, reviewing the new proposals for the waterfront. We had chosen a firm that specialized in sustainable, community-focused design. The lead architect was a woman who listened more than she spoke. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from a business news app. I rarely checked them, but the headline caught my eye. Sterling Architecture files for bankruptcy following contract failures. I tapped the article. It was brief. After the Meridian Gala disaster, Thomas had lost 2 other major clients. Rumors of his instability had spread. His staff had left. The article mentioned he was now working as a consultant for a mid-tier firm in another city. I stared at his picture. He looked older. Tired. The spark was gone. A year ago, seeing him fail would have terrified me. I would have rushed to fix it, to soothe him, to take on extra shifts to cover the bills. I would have made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. Now I just felt a distant, quiet pity. I closed the article and set the phone down. Dorcas. I turned. Uncle Magnus was standing in the doorway of the living room, holding a roll of drawings. He visited every Sunday for coffee. We were rebuilding our relationship brick by brick. The board meeting is in an hour, he said. Are you ready? I stood up, smoothing the front of my blazer. It was a vibrant blue. A color Thomas used to say was too loud for me. It was my favorite color. I'm ready, I said. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. I paused by the mirror in the hallway. The woman looking back wasn't the scared girl outside the gala. She wasn't the invisible wife serving drinks. She was Dorcas Titus, and she was finally fully awake. I walked out the door, into the life I had built for myself. Thank you for listening to this story. We often accept the love we think we deserve, shrinking ourselves to fit into someone else's frame. But true worth isn't about being chosen by someone else. It's about choosing yourself. Question for you. Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to realize the price was too high? Tell me your story in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories about finding strength in the quiet moments. Remember, you are not the background character in your own life. See you in the next video.